Good afternoon and welcome back to Black Press USA Live. Now serving in his seventh term in the U.S. House of Representatives from Georgia's 4th Congressional District, which encompasses parts of DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Newton counties and all of Rockdale County, Congressman Hank Johnson has distinguished himself as a substantive and effective, lawmaker and a leading national progressive voice. Named one of the most effective Democrats in Congress by University of Virginia and University of Vanderbilt study, Rep. Johnson has proven his ability to get things done. From his seat on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Johnson has introduced, co-sponsored, and passed legislation to level the playing field for everyday Americans. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you for having me, Stacey. I'm happy to be on Black Press USA with Stacey Brown.
We are happy to have you, and as you can tell, I'm already tongue-tied because of the great representative from the state of Georgia. So,
listen, me up now. I'm starting to antsy about this interview now.
Hey, soften them up for the kill.
Right? Yeah, you know how we do.
Listen, let's start with the Stop the Militarizing Law Enforcement Act that was directly cut and pasted into the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, just to underscore the importance of this legislation. Can you do that?
Yeah, the Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act was first introduced back in 2014 in response to the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson. And it was actually a bill that started with me at Christmas time of 2013. I was in a Christmas parade for a small city in my district. This small city probably has about 400 or 500 people in it. They have a police department. And at that parade, at that Christmas parade, I was walking behind the vehicle that the mayor was seated in. And so she was up there in the vehicle, waving at the crowds and everything. And we were walking behind her. And I noticed that this was a great big military vehicle that the mayor was in. And she was like in the gun turret, out and, waving and everything. And I thought to myself, where could this piece of equipment come from? What does the city need with this? And so I asked the mayor about it, and she said they got it from the Department of Defense, and they used it to pull cars out of ditches when it snows. And we don't get a lot of snow down here in Georgia, occasionally. And whenever it comes, people don't know how to drive. And so you do have to pull them out of ditches. But this was a great big vehicle. Seemed like a tow truck could have done the job as opposed to this big military vehicle. And so I asked my staff to kind of look into how could the city get this vehicle from the Department of Defense. And that's when we discovered the surplus military weaponry program called the 1033 program that allows for city and state and federal law enforcement agencies to go directly to the Department of Defense, look on their website, and find whatever surplus military equipment they needed, and then they can order it directly from the DOD, and it comes right to the local or state or federal law enforcement agency. And so this is how we've seen militarization creep into police departments. And I wasn't thinking about that at the time. Nothing had happened like Michael Brown yet with use of this equipment. But, I just thought that, I'll look into this and see what it's all about. And once we found out about it, I had some legislation drafted that would stop this flow of weapons and weaponry into the streets of our country. And then the Michael Brown episode occurred in August of 2014. And that legislation was ready to be introduced, but we were on August recess. And so I waited until September and filed that legislation. And it has been filed each session of Congress since then, but it's only been since the killing of George Floyd that a vehicle came through by which we could attach that Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act and get it passed. And so it's now been passed out of the House of Representatives and now in the hands of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, in the Mitch McConnell Graveyard, where so much other good legislation that the House has passed is buried in.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about Mitch McConnell's graveyard. Have you seen a leader do this the way he has? I mean, everything goes in that graveyard, if you will, meaning it goes somewhere on his desk and stays there. Have you seen this before?
Well, we've seen gridlock in Congress before, but we've seen a lot of production in the House over the last 2 years under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic majority. And we've been very efficient, and we've turned out a lot of good legislation, and it has just piled up. I've never seen a situation where a Senate majority leader has only one thing in mind, and that is to confirm right-wing judges to the bench at the exclusion of all other matters. I mean, Senate hasn't taken up any kind of appropriations bill. They have had the HEROES Act, which is a coronavirus response bill that would put money in the pockets of people who have lost their jobs. 52 million people in America claiming unemployment insurance, and people need that extra $600 a week. Mitch McConnell hasn't acted on the HEROES Act. So much legislation that is in that Mitch McConnell graveyard, but yet they have confirmed over 200 Federalist Society right-wing judges to the bench, young people who have politics as opposed to the law on their brains, and trying to reshape the judiciary. So that appears to be Mitch McConnell's only concern, and I hope that the voters will punish him in in November, and remove him from leadership by installing a Democratic majority in the Senate.
Yeah, and how would you estimate the likelihood of any of these bills actually coming to a vote in the Senate?
Well, the closer we get to November 3rd, the less chance that any action will be taken on these bills. Mitch McConnell knows that if nothing goes through the Senate, then there's nothing for the president to sign into law. And they frankly want to keep everything the way it is. That's what conservatives do. They don't want change. They want everything to remain as is. They want to be able to maintain their positions of privilege. That's fundamental. That's primary. And so that's why they are conservative. They want everything to remain the same. Progressives are looking to change things and make things better for all of the people. And so we're not going to get any kind of change until we get Mitch McConnell out of the Senate. And indeed, we need a president who will sign our legislation into law as well. So I'm hopeful that the voters will not be deterred from the voter suppression tactics that are being used now, including slowing down the post office, knowing that vote by mail is the way to do things during a pandemic. But yet the Trump post office is gumming up the works, trying to shut that whole process down so that it won't be effective for purposes of the vote in November. And we can't let that happen.
Yeah, and speaking of the election, Joe Biden just this week announced the largest reservation. I guess he reserved the largest ad buy in history, $280 million, specifically targeted at African American media. With that in mind, Congressman, how important is it to get the message to entities like us at the Black Press USA and Black-owned media?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do have to deal with folks on both sides of the aisle who believe that they know what's best for us, when in fact we know what's best for us. And we know that Black people uh, accept their news input from Black media sources, radio, Black publications, um, Black websites, Black webcasts. I mean, we are ethnocentric, just like everybody else. We like to deal with ourselves. That doesn't mean we don't like to go outside and deal with others. I mean, clearly we do that, but it's a part of our culture that we get our information through trusted sources. And so any politician who neglects the Black press does so at their peril. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of that happening over the course of history. But I'm always hopeful and optimistic that those trends will change and folks will wise up and understand how to influence and activate the Black community. And it is through our media organs. And the Black Press USA is certainly taking things to the next level in terms of meeting the people where they are, particularly young people, and making sure that however they get their news, get their information, that's where you are. So I appreciate your work so much, and I'm just honored to be on your show.
Well, we're honored to have you, Congressman. We're talking with Congressman Hank Johnson from the great state of Georgia, Black Press USA Live. Isn't it more important, Congressman, than just a matter of getting information from trusted sources? Isn't a large part of the need for the Black press that without it, a lot of news would never see the light of day?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, when you look at, and I don't even want to say mainstream media, but many media sources circulate the same information, kind of like radio, shall I say, terrestrial radio, playing a set list of songs day in and day out, repeatedly, loop after loop after loop. And some of the news excludes that which is of greater interest to Black folks. And of course, we need to know what's going on out everywhere.
Right.
Uh, and so that we need that news, but we also need the news from those who see the angles that are of best or most suited for our communities. And so, I mean, our powers that be who deal in information, they know exactly what buttons to tap. They know what we need. And so, you guys offer us the food, the healthy food, the nourishment for our collective minds and mindsets. Um, and so that's what you do. And so, it's important that you be in a position to do that. And we need to strengthen your ability to do that because, I mean, you get us the news in a way that is palatable to us and that is interesting to us, and also stuff that we need to know that may get shut out of that loop of news coverage that I was talking about earlier. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, and for the viewers who are watching from Georgia, we know that there's a lot of friction between the mayor and the governor. Can you weigh in on what's going on there, the debate between the two?
Yeah, for those who may not have known of this, just like Trump sent federal troops to Portland and Seattle, shortly after he did that, our governor called out the National Guard and sent them into Atlanta. And so what these tactics are meant to do is to show white folks that white governors and white presidents are getting tough on crime, and they are saying that peaceful protests are Antifa, and people are trying to rebel, and bringing back visions of Nat Turner, and trying to scare people into thinking, hey, they're coming to your neighborhoods. They're even coming to the suburbs, and coming to your homes, and we are going to impose law and order. So what our governor did, same one who sued Keisha Lance Bottoms for imposing a mask requirement on people to protect everyone from the pandemic. What they're really trying to do is say that these areas where black folks live, I'm going to send the National Guard in, get tough on them, and therefore you will elect me because you fear what happens if there's a black person like Stacey Abrams who's positioned to run for governor again in 2 short years. We don't want that to happen. So therefore, we're sending the messaging to you that you've got to keep us in place. And so the campaign for governor is already is on and popping, as the young folks say. And,
How about
and,
that?
and, and so to sue the mayor for trying to protect the people of Atlanta, what can I say?
Yeah.
We're catching hell economically, medically, politically, any other way that you can slice the bread. We're under attack, and but fortunately, we've got a lot of tools to fight back with, and the biggest one is knowledge.
Yeah, and I do want to take a question from Ernest Coverson, who's asking, does Rep. Johnson support and or will he sign on as co-sponsor of Break the Cycle of Violence Act, which provides funding for community-based organizations working on gun violence?
Yeah, of course, I support all measures that get at this gun culture that places in the South are particularly havens for. So I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation. If you'll give me the bill number, I'll make sure to have my staff to take a look at it, make sure that it doesn't have any poison pills in it, like, you know, anti-immigration and, that kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
As long as if it's a straight up bill that's going to protect people and enhance the ability of us to rid ourselves of this gun culture, I'll be all for it.
Yeah, and Congressman Johnson, I know you had a great relationship with the late Congressman John Lewis. Um, we we know that the Voting Rights Act is one of those things that is sitting and waiting for the Senate to act on. They haven't acted on it. Can you talk a little bit about John Lewis and voting rights and your relationship with John Lewis?
Well, I probably would not be in Congress were it not for John Lewis. I ran for Congress back in 2006 against a popular incumbent. I felt like I could do a better job in certain areas that I felt were being deprived, and so I offered myself for the seat, and the citizens elected me. But with a couple of days, or maybe a day before election day, John Lewis was quoted in the press as saying, I think Hank Johnson would make a great congressman. And I think just that utterance was worth a few votes that came my way. And as a result of that, I was able to force the incumbent into a runoff. And because the incumbent had not garnered 50% percent of the vote plus one in the primary, that meant that things were looking bad for the incumbent in the runoff. And true to form, I was able to win the runoff, and I've been representing the citizens of the 4th District ever since. And so I attribute my being here in Congress, much of that has to go to John Lewis, who, in addition to making that utterance at a crucial time during the campaign, also had referred a young man over to my campaign who wanted to work for him. This young man wanted to work for John Lewis, but John Lewis didn't really have a race that year, so he sent that young man over to my campaign, and that young man was his name was John Ossoff. He was 18 years old at the time, just graduating from high school and getting ready to enter Georgetown University to begin his undergraduate studies. And John Ossoff was a whiz kid, and I didn't have any kind of social media operation going. No other congressman had one either, because I mean, it was just really getting started at that time. But John Lewis put the campaign in that game, and in putting it on social media, that kind of blew things up on a national level, and so that was an important aspect of my ability to win that race as well. So John Lewis did two great things for me during that campaign, which I'll always be indebted to him for. And while I was in Congress, over the last 13 years, our relationship has just flourished, deepened, and never knew how much I really thought about the man until he passed away. I never expected him to pass. I always expected him to defeat that illness and return to Congress. So when he passed away, it was a tough thing for me, and it was a tough thing for many others as well. And so we miss John Lewis. His life was all about voting rights. He shed blood for people like me to be able to vote, and indeed to be able to win political office. And so to uphold his legacy is good reason to fight for passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which lies in the Senate graveyard. It was formerly known as H.R. 4, but it's now known as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And we're going to have to get Mitch McConnell out of there so that we can get that thing passed and signed into law.
Yeah, and by the way, the Mr. Culberson, who presented that earlier question about that legislation, the bill is HR 4836. HR 4836. And
it sounds like something that I might already be on, but I'll ask my staff to take a look at it.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yep. And, I know that as much as John Lewis championed voting and voting rights, he would also champion the census, right? Can you talk a little bit about the census?
Yeah, man, we're under a big threat, a serious threat right there. Last week Trump announced that his Census Bureau is not going to count all of the undocumented people who show up in the census. They're not going to count them, when in fact the Constitution of this country states that every person shall be counted. Doesn't depend on whether or not they're citizens or not. The census is just simply a tally of everybody who is in America during the period of getting the information, which has been in place since April now. Census has been determining, who's in the country, and basically by means of the internet and by mail. And so every person should have received a census form in the mail that you can fill out and send back. And it gives instructions about how to complete the census online. And so it's been a big push to get people to answer up online. And about 61%, I think, of the households have responded to the census at this point. And from here on out, it's going to be kind of like a field data collection is what's happening now. And so Trump said last week, I'm not going to count the undocumented people. And this week, they announced that we're not going to extend the field data collection period to October 31st as planned. We're going to cut it short by 30 days. So all of the data collection is going to end on September 30th. And so that means that the 100 million or so people in the 60 million households that have yet to be counted may not get counted. And that's a threat because Black people are traditionally hard to count. We make up a hard to count community, as do Latinos, as do children, as do the homeless, as do college students who are away in college. So these hard to count communities tend towards people who vote Democratic also. And so what Trump is trying to do is to shorten the time for the count so that they can eliminate as many Black folks and brown folks from being counted in the census. And if that happens, then it means that the federal resources that flow, $1.5 trillion a year, federal resources flowing to each state. That means, and it's based on the census, how much money each area of the state gets. It means that we get shorted out of our money. And so we need to answer up to the census. And also, the census determines how many representatives we get to have to represent us. If we only have one when we should have two, that means we're getting shorted in terms of how much voting power we have in the House of Representatives, in the state legislatures, on the county commission, city council. All of these races, political races, are determined, the boundaries are determined by the census. And so make America great again means make America white again, or keep America white. And that crowd, led by Donald Trump, doesn't want to count Black and brown people. And so we've got to thwart that effort by simply getting out here and responding to the census. Everyone who, I've got a phone number. Yeah, I've got a phone number. You can call the census and do your census by phone. That number is 844-330-2020. You can go to that, you can call that number, and the folks will get your information right there. Or you can go to www.my2020.census.gov. That's www.my2020census.gov.
And say the number one more time too, Congressman.
Phone number is area code 844-330-2020. And it's www.my2020.census.gov.
Great.
I'm sorry, it's not a .20. It's www.my2020census.gov.
There you go. And Congressman, we just about out of time, but before we close, we got to ask you about your thoughts on the options for vice president. We know that there are at least 5 candidates, and 3 of them are African Americans that we know of, including Representative Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. What's your thoughts, Congressman, as Vice President Biden is poised to make his pick?
Yeah, I'd like for Vice President Biden, who has served as vice president himself, and he was a great vice president. I would like for him to choose someone who he feels most comfortable with being his vice president and select that person. And I think all of the names that are floating around would make excellent vice presidents. I want the vice president to pick one of those who he feels best suited to partner with. And then, regardless of the selection, I'm going to be out in support of him. And because we need to change lanes with this guy we have in office here, we need to put him out by the side of the road and keep the vehicle moving with Joe Biden as the driver, and whoever is sitting shotgun with him, I'm gonna be fine with.
Congressman Hank Johnson from the great state of Georgia. As we close, Congressman Johnson, we are going to salute you and your relationship with the great Congressman John Lewis. So thank you everyone for joining us, and enjoy the photographic salute to the Congressman John Lewis and Hank Johnson.
Thank you.
That was great memories, I'm sure. Thanks again for joining us, Congressman. Everyone stay safe and stay well. Coming up at the top of the hour, we have a great conversation planned about reparations. Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas joins us, as well as the businessman and former Democratic presidential candidate Tom Steyer, to talk about H.R. 40, a bill that works toward reparations for slavery.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.